I was poking around trying to figure out who was an attrition risk, like who's flight risk right now. And in that conversation surfaced a name. And I was it was like I was holding a Post-it note in my hand. I wasn't really, but like figuratively holding this Post-it note in my hand and walked over to that leader.
Welcome to the WorkOps Podcast. In every episode, we dig into one story, a process that went sideways, a system that just didn't work, and what someone actually did about it. It's packed with practical lessons that you'll want to bring straight back to your team. This podcast is brought to you by Kinfolk, the AI service desk built for HR. I'm your host, Jeet, and with that, let's dive in. Hey everyone, today I am joined by Anne Watson, who's the CPO at Cover Genius, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we jump into things, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you choose HR?
That's a very big question. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I'm Anne Watson. I'm the Chief People Officer at Cover Genius. My career started actually at Starbucks when it was essentially a startup, tiny little company, had 200 stores, 3 drinks, had to be over 18 to work there. It was my part-time job in college. I stayed. I went through their management training program. The part of that I really liked was the HR side. I liked hiring and I liked coaching and I liked performance management. I didn't necessarily like firing people, but that comes with it. And the other thing I did for them, which was odd, was opening up new stores. So I did like that sort of expansion project. It's almost like massive project management of like, I got to go put all these pieces together to build something we need.
Yeah.
And I left Starbucks because at the time they didn't hire for corporate internally, and I was really interested in recruiting. So I left to become a recruiter, and that was sort of the gateway for me. From there, I became a more of a generalist, and then I became an HR manager, and I did that as like when solo HR was kind of a thing, and then built from there. And here we are today.
Here you are today. I was speaking to another chief people officer, and they were saying that there's usually 3 routes to get to the chief people officer, 3 and a little bit. So one is the recruiter route, where talent expansion and acquisition was the main priority, or there's the people partner and business partnering route. And then there's a smaller path of people operations technology, and an even smaller one of moving from legal perhaps into the CHRO position. Is that kind of what you see as well, or are there other paths to your job?
Oh, this is a big question. I think that's mostly right. I think the people operations, like the tech side of it, is a little less common. Maybe that's becoming more common now, but keep in mind, we've only had tech in HR for like 10 years, really. If you look back, I mean, maybe it's a little bit more now, but the sort of giant explosion of investment in technology for the people space doesn't happen until a lot later. So before then, it was like, ADP and spreadsheets. We didn't really have a lot of things. So I think that's probably taking a little longer to evolve. And I think that's going to continue to evolve with what's in front of us. The typical path, you have the sort of talent acquisition path, and you have the more generalist business partner path. And what I think is really interesting about those is that I think hiring for one of those 2 paths is sort of trend-based. So depending on what's going, especially in the Bay, I'm mostly talking about the Bay Area because that's where I exist. In the San Francisco Bay Area, startups, I think, tend to want one of 2 types of people leaders, depending on what's going on. And so when you, like right now, I would say that we're in a phase of probably preferencing talent acquisition-based leaders who came from that, because you have all these tiny baby organizations that are like, here's $60 billion, now go grow and expand and take over the world. We're sort of in that phase. And what'll happen is like 2 years from now, at least from what I've seen, and this is moving a lot faster, so maybe it's 2 months from now, as these companies become 150 employees, 500 employees, 1,000 employees, et cetera, the problems they're facing are going to shift. You get from this, like, how quickly can we get people in the door, to like, now we have to take care of them for the rest of their employment life cycle. So I think depending on what's happening, we favor one of those 2 things. But the third path you mentioned, or fourth, maybe it's the fourth one, you mentioned from legal. I think this is really fascinating in a lot of organizations, not a lot, but there was a trend for a while of
Okay.
having somebody from product or having somebody from engineering, or it was almost like literally anybody except an HR person come and take over. Which I kind of
Wow.
get. I mean,
Oh, yeah?
it's frustrating, but I kind of get it. But it's frustrating because what really bothers me about it is the reciprocal never happens. You very, very rarely find a chief product
Mm.
officer who came out of HR. Sometimes even in the tech products in our own space, you
Yeah.
rarely find CEOs who came out of HR. So it's a little bit of I think it would be very common, for example, for the CPO to report to the CFO, and the reverse would be unheard of.
Yeah. I feel like
Weird.
the tables are about to turn now, because AI
Mm.
is not a tooling. I know AI is not a tooling topic only. It's a workforce subject.
It is.
And therefore, who is better placed to lead this and think about this than a commercially minded CPO? And if that's the case, then the transition to other roles may become more common sense, perhaps, to
Could
others.
be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there's a path there.
baby, I mean, this is playing out, this conversation about, and sometimes we want to use that ownership word, which is probably not the right word for it, but like, who owns this
Mm,
transformation? And is this person coming out of the people side, or are they coming out of the technology side?
mm,
And it does feel a little bit some days like organizations are sort of planting a flag on one side or the other, or leading from one side or the other. Like, we're leading this transformation with technology, but we realized really quickly that we had to follow with the human side of it. I was reading I think it was Inc. magazine or something, had an article about AI transformations that don't go well because the employees basically rebel against it. Okay, I'm going to give you all this training and all of this, extra initiative and all of these things that you need, and now go forth.
yeah.
And in at least one organization, the result was that the employees were actually sabotaging those
Yeah.
efforts, which I thought was really fascinating,
Yeah.
because that's a human problem. And I think we can all agree that we want this technology to make our lives better, to make our work better, to make us more efficient, to make us more effective. But that doesn't solve any of the sort of human backbone problems that like, the human problems are always the human
That's
problem,
still there.
whether, yeah, right. You have 5 people, you have 500 people, like, they're still people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. True. It's a wild time right now.
it really
And
is.
speaking of problems, let's dive
Yeah.
into your story of a tool or a system that was dysfunctional, or a process.
Hmm.
And what kind of company, to set some context, was this happening at? And then we can dive into your story.
Well, the excellent thing about this question, first of all, is that this question, gives you a minute to stop and, like, what didn't I like? What was broken? What did shape?
Yeah.
And my list got real long, real fast. I'll tell you, like, there are a lot of really bizarre artifacts of habit in the people space. One of my favorite jokes is that when the conversation shifted to, like, look, okay, be data driven, and we're like, oh yes, awesome, here's data, and they're like, ew, no, not that data. Bring me data that
Yeah.
reinforces my intuition, and then we'll be happy. And I'm like, okay, well, that's
Well,
not how data. Sorry. So it's sort of like, yeah, be more data driven, but not like that.
not that one.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, not that way. And actually, the thing that really, what I landed on, because it has been literally every job I've had, every place I've worked, this has been true. And this is the first time at Cover Genius that I've been able to try something different about it.
Hmm.
And it's really fun, and it's really nice to be able to work in an organization that allows for this kind of experimentation, but also this kind of progressive thinking. So the thing that really bothers me, of the list of things that bother me, the top of that list,
Yeah.
is broadly pay for performance. And what I mean by that more specifically is, and I'll go like as specific as possible. The moment when a manager goes to an employee after a review cycle and says, thank you so much for all your hard work. Here is your 3% raise. You did such a great job. And the employee's like, what does this mean? Like, you told me I did a great job. You actually told me I did a great job last year, but you gave me a 5% raise. And you told me I did a great job the year before that, and you gave me no raise. So what does this really mean? And then the manager is really stuck in this place of inauthenticity. They actually can't answer that question. For a variety of reasons. But that's really that rub, that sort of moment of a breakdown of integrity. The manager can no longer support what they're saying in a way that is congruent to what the employee is experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I say this to managers, they're like, yeah, I hate that. I really, it's awful. Yeah.
We've all
We've
experienced
all been
it.
there. Right? Yeah. That's what's so great about it. It's incredibly universal, but we all keep doing it.
On repeat.
On repeat.
Every year. It's interesting. Yeah, you're right.
Once or twice a year, every year. Yeah.
I've had a friend who left because she said the same thing that you did, which is, hey, last year you said I did great and I got this much extra. This year you said I did great. I got nothing. Yeah. So I don't believe that I did great. And That's so right. I'm out.
Yeah. And there's two things. I think there's two things going on here. One is this is actually not about performance. It's about budgets. It's always fundamentally about budgets. Because on the non-manager side of it, right? Every year, some variation of a conversation happens where we decide how much we can afford to give out. And that's a budget conversation. And then depending on lots of different ways to do this, but at some point we turn back into the organization and say, okay, here's what you have available to reward people. And maybe this is, if you want to reward someone, you have to take it away from someone else. Maybe this is, you have to, my favorite, and by that I mean not favorite, you have to force this into a bell shape. Or you have to, it's, connected to a number of stars or bells or whatever you give out.
Yeah.
But really the decision has still been made from a budget perspective of what good is going to be rewarded with what the cap is, right?
Yeah.
But the other side of it that drives me crazy, again, with the whole bring data, but not that data, is I think there's a real disconnect in what pay for performance means and what it does and when it works and when it doesn't. And from all the research I've done, and I'm not claiming to be I've dedicated a year of my life to this, but what's really fascinating is you can find lots of studies of, we took a bunch of people and we put them in a room and we experimented on them, those kinds of research studies where it doesn't matter what the task is. The task can be creative, the task can be math, the task can be, cognitive, whatever you're asking someone to do. And if you ask them to do it, as quickly as they can, and then you say, okay, now do it as quickly as you can, but you get $5 for every whatever bar over the bar line here. You don't improve the outcome. The exception to this is sales. So selling is we're going to just put selling over there because that is very clearly, we have lots of data to support that works. If you are selling something and you have an incentive to sell it, you'll do a better job selling. And that's both a personality kind of persona thing as well as a kind of human incentive thing. But the other side of that, we aren't actually improving someone's performance. We're sort of rewarding intrinsic motivation. And I think we get confused between what is performance and what is motivation. And so what we think we're trying to do is motivate people. And what we're calling it is performance.
Interesting.
And I don't think those things are the same. I don't consider them the same anyway. So I like to, and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but now we have this third complication in this scenario, which is pay transparency. So now we've gotten this far to this moment, right, where we have said, we sort of had this conversation that lacks integrity around you did really well, here's your raise. It was actually a budget conversation. We said we were going to do that because it was going to improve your performance. It actually doesn't improve your performance. Maybe for some part of the population, it increases motivation. And then now we're okay, now with data, justify why you did what you did. And you see where I'm going with this? These things don't go together. I'm going to complicate this even further by saying there's one other thing, and this is on us. This is on people, HR people. We expected managers to be able to provide clarity and understanding from a process that we kept opaque and that really deeply lacks transparency. When it comes to comp, it's one of the few places left where you see, at least in my experience, I see HR people and comp people put up these walls real fast, right? Like when someone says, "Oh, let me see the data," they're like, "Ooh, no, can't see that." and so we've simultaneously made it like scary, dark science, which it's not, and tried to tell people it's simple enough that anybody could do it. And that I think I think this is on us. Like we were trying to navigate a world where all of these things were playing and trying to also sort of keep people happy and keep the peace. And this is how we did it. And I think we could do better.
Okay. So I'd love to hear how you're doing it now and also how you might do it differently with the new technologies available. There are a lot of pieces to fix. You mentioned motivation, separating that to performance. There's a transparency piece and like what level of transparency and what does transparency even mean? Like, is it, directly sharing or is it ranges? Is it more about the transparency of the rationale of decisions behind why we've chosen these things? And then the providing clarity to managers of something that they don't really control. So because of all these interconnected things, what were you seeing happening on the ground floor? Were people leaving? Were managers leaving? Or what was the impact?
I mean, I think so. The first impact that I think part of what we do is try to eliminate this. The first impact is distraction. So as long as everybody's talking about, thinking about, focused on compensation, they're not focused on whatever else they were hired to do in the organization. There's really only one or two people in the organization who are hired to focus on compensation. And they are not all the managers and the employees, unless you happen to work, I don't know, unless you're at Radford, right? Then sure. But for the vast majority of companies, that is not what you're hired to do. And so anytime you're spending working on this is fundamentally a distraction. So the more you can do to sort of educate and ease concern for employees, that's phenomenal. I love the idea that we could proactively go start having classes around some of the things that are a little harder to understand in our world, whether it's U.S. healthcare or whether it's how a compensation survey works. Why do we break out in hives when you ask us about an unverified source of salary data?
Yeah.
And what's the difference? And why do we care? And why does this matter? So I think there's that piece of it. So you've got distraction fundamentally. I do think it's a big part of manager burnout, right? I think this just escalated so much during the pandemic where we already had this sort of moment in their day that was incongruent, or in their process that was really incongruent, and that probably stayed with them for a little while. And then we added all of this additional sort of emotional labor of what everybody was going through. Like they just really got squeezed, and they haven't stopped that. And now we're probably compounding that again with this, like, hey, try this new thing, but also it's scary. And, we're working in this environment where every day there's an announcement that somebody says, hey, we're doing a layoff because of AI, or we're cutting our 401k match because of AI, right? Like it's a nerve-wracking time to be an employee, and it's really a nerve-wracking time to be a manager trying to support those employees.
Yeah.
So I think anything you can do to sort of to help soothe that, because nobody said, hey, let's build a pay process that will actually increase anxiety and reduce integrity in the organization.
Yeah.
Nobody did that.
No.
And
Yeah.
all of this that we've created is unintentional.
Yeah. And are you now doing those kind of the financial literacy classes, or like the classes around this is why we do compensation the way that we do? Is like one of the changes that you've made?
No, not yet. We're getting there. But let me tell you a little bit about what I've been able to do at Cover Genius and why Cover Genius is different in that way.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's really interesting about Cover Genius is it's a little over 10 years old. We had employees in well over 30 countries when I arrived about 2 years ago. And it was clear that during the pandemic, you could see this in the hiring patterns. During the pandemic, like a lot of organizations, they were like, yes, this means we can hire anybody anywhere. And we did. And so instead of having a real clear sort of location-based hiring strategy, we had this just free for all. And when you're a global organization, the impact of that is a lot bigger than it is if you're a US company or you're a California company, even a California, New York company, and you say,
Yeah.
actually, you can hire anywhere you want in the US. Everybody go, off you go. Omaha, whatever. That's a lot more reasonable amount of time zones to manage. What happened for this organization is we ended up where someone, the manager's in London, their team is in Sydney, their manager is in California. And this burnout across the organization, really from managing across really disparate time zones and sort of like the lack of efficiency of pushing things around. So we sat back and said, okay, how do we start to restructure this team and start to reorganize it? But one of the artifacts of that organization where it's very homegrown, it's very, it's growing very organically. At one point in the organization's history, I don't know when it was because I inherited it, there was a decision made that managers wouldn't be able to see compensation. And the reason they wouldn't be able to see compensation is because the differences in geographies were so wild. It was just really uncomfortable and difficult for managers to deal with having employees who made more than they do because they were in a different geo. And so the answer to that for them was to just not do it. And so there's just a real small, 5, 6 people in the organization who could see that, the top level leaders of the organization, but no one else could. They could kind of get a little bit of it at hiring, but not a lot. And they could maybe kind of get a little bit of it at promotion or kind of recognition cycles, but again, not a lot. And when I arrived, my first instinct was like, oh, obviously I have to change this. And then I just didn't get to because we were busy doing other things. We were moving people around. We were changing where this team was. And so we didn't do it. And the more I thought about it and the more conversations I had, including this one with managers around, hey, I don't know why we ask you to do compensation because it's terrible for you. The more I thought, this is an organization where I have a chance to I don't even have to take it away. They've never had it. And so we could do something really different here because of that sort of leg up we had where managers don't see comp. And we could keep it that way and absolve them of this responsibility. So they were literally free from it. I'm telling you, I'm willing to take this on for you. Now, if I'm going to take that on for, 700 people without having an army of compensation people, I have to do something more sustainable. And on top of that, I've got this we're existing in a global pay transparency world.
Yeah.
So we built, we built a compensation structure, same as everybody does. It was pretty much the first time the organization had done that. We aligned everybody to it. We corrected anybody who was out of our our parameters for that, of what we said was acceptable for someone to exist in that structure. And then we said, we're switching to anniversary-based pay. Everybody's going to get an increase in their anniversary. It'll happen automatically. It doesn't matter how you performed. It doesn't matter what your review said. And we're going to do that every year from now on. And we'll pick, basically what we'll do is we'll bring everybody to our market that we wanted, that we said our market target. And then we will hedge essentially how we think the market's going to change over the next year. And that's going to be the percentage we choose. And right now it's really crude. We do the same for everybody. But what we're leading to is being able to have a little more subtlety and a little more nuance based on different geos as we sort of consolidate into that. But the first thing we wanted to do was try to get this structure as neat and as tidy as we could, and then start to change this. The first year of switching to anniversary is a little dicey.
Yeah.
And I had lots of really interesting conversations with people about this, and I would say things like, if we didn't do this, our raise pool was probably going to be 2.5%, which means your raise was going to be somewhere between 0 and maybe 3%. And instead, I've guaranteed you this amount, this 3% amount. And some of the people were like, no, I'd rather roll the dice. Like,
Interesting.
whether or not that's really true, and was really interesting is some of those conversations I went back and looked and like, what is their raise history and what is their performance history?
Yeah.
And it was really not the super high performers that you would be worried. Like we have two worries, right? When we go to something everybody gets the same. One is that our high performers will be under incentivized, and we figured out a way
Hmm.
to deal with that. And then the second is that we'll be wasting money rewarding low performers. And that actually turned out to be probably the biggest unlock for the organization was if somebody expressed to me that they had heartburn about giving someone the same raise as everybody else because that person wasn't performing,
Hmm.
that was like, oh, great. Let's go talk about that. Let's go talk about
Nice.
how we do this. And oh, by the way, I'm actually still going to do this increase because when you're ready to replace that person with the quality level you want, I don't want you to be so far behind the market because you've held back compensation for this low performer that you actually can't hire to the level of quality and performance you want to hire.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Okay. So
I'm going to load, it's sort of like I'm going to keep bulking up this seat so that
yes,
when you are ready to fill it properly, it'll be the right size.
amazing. You mentioned you had to correct. Does that mean that you had to bring certain salaries down to the
Yeah.
range? Okay, it was all
No.
full increase. Okay, that's a
All
good
increase.
positive story. That's awesome. And then it sounds like what you're doing is you are separating the performance from the pay. So there's like a fairness element of like, are we bringing everyone up to market? And then it's about incentivizing people. You mentioned your high performers through a different mechanism
Mhm.
to be able to continue to keep them in their seat and
Yeah.
keep them motivated.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're saying that actually, and this may not be the case for you guys, but someone in San Francisco would be getting the same salary for the job as someone in Bangalore, let's say. Is that how it played out?
No, they're not getting the same salary because still getting a
Okay.
local salary,
Local.
but they
Okay.
might be getting the same increase on that salary right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Because then
Yeah.
that raises other questions, right? Of like, how do we,
And does.
do you compensate based on the job to be done? Or do you, yeah. Is
Whole
there a
other
local
can of
maximum?
worms on that.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but we did, I mean, and this has been kind of a win for us facing down the EU pay transparencies. We did decide that this group of jobs are like work, and we're gonna pay them with the same ranges.
Okay.
And so we ended up with, and this is a pretty normal practice to say like, okay, all of these jobs are going to be together in the same salary structure. And yeah, maybe there's one that's like a little bit lower, but honestly, the work isn't any different than this other job that's a little bit higher. And so we don't believe there should be a punishment for, maybe, or a, diminishment for maybe something, a market force that is something, maybe it's gender, or maybe it's,
Yeah.
some legacy reason why that exists that
Right.
way. So we'd already done that sort of structure.
Nice.
And then what we've been doing is really looking at more global organizations and thinking about how they're applying those. But the thing to keep in mind is that if we're testing this annually against refreshed market data, if a market has really moved and we set these tolerances to say, like, this is what is acceptable based on the data we find, if one market takes off, we will be able to respond to that because we'll see that in that data. And we're looking both at, the fun thing is now we can look at both the very hard survey data, but we can also incorporate more of the intuitive hiring data. So like if we start to see, I talk to our hiring teams all the time about this. If we start to see a certain market or a certain role start to have struggles with hiring, that's a really, and we did this at one point. We had a certain role in the organization that was just kind of every time we would go hire it would sort of pop up as a thing we needed that was contentious, and so we just went out and targeted that role and looked at it from a data perspective, and were able to sort of proactively make a change that helped us not start to, instead of continuing to do that for another year or something along those lines, we were able to really proactively shift that and address that right away, which is also
Yeah.
great because if we hadn't done that, and then I fast forward to the end of the year when we would do our kind of annual study, we would have had a much bigger hole to fill. And maybe that, and again, like this is all about budget. So maybe that would have been a harder ask to go back and say, okay, I actually found that this whole group of people are now way below market. This ability to sort of hedge through the year is really kind of helping us keep things sustainable, which is really nice.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things and words that stood out to me. You mentioned proactivity. You mentioned access to data and having it earlier on. It sounds like it's almost like you're iterating on the process itself, and you're able to iterate faster compared to what you were able to do earlier on. Is that because of new tools? Are you using AI in any particular way to be able to help you do that? We've heard about certain companies building their own internal feeds and compensation planning tools, whereas other folks are going out and buying it. Yeah, that's a whole other topic in and of itself. But what's kind of helped you, and has AI fitted into this at all, or not really?
It has. And to some extent, I would even put that in a category of like accidentally that has helped us.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, so we partnered with Candor IQ as our sort of compensation platform.
Excellent.
And one of the things that we decided here at Cover Genius was that both myself and my head of talent, Greg Russell, we decided that when we looked at the tool stack we were inheriting, we were not going to replace it with anything legacy. We would only start with AI native platforms. And it's been wild, because having been in the Bay Area through the whole technology transformation of HR, it used to, and also I should also mention, having been a really long time member of People Tech Partners. So we've been seeing organizations, we see 4 companies a quarter going through this incubator program where they're getting all this intense feedback from us. And there's a really dramatic shift. Those companies used to come back to us 1 and 2 years later and say, oh, hey, remember that thing you guys all told us you wanted to fix? We just fixed it, huzzah. And now sometimes we are on those calls and founders are changing their platform in response to our feedback. The rate of development is phenomenal. It's unbelievable how different it is. It's just night and day, how much faster these. So we said we were only going to buy these newer tools. And even that has been like, I'm like, I don't even know if we do that anymore, because to your point earlier, maybe we're going to build some of these things internally. And now we have these questions about like, okay, well, what do we build internally and what do we build externally? So back to the story about Candor, they have multiple agents embedded in the platform and in different areas, depending on what you're interested in. It's really, instead of kind of traditional reporting, it's more, I guess, query based.
Yeah.
And so I was poking around trying to figure out who was an attrition risk, like who's flight risk right now. And in that conversation surfaced a name. And I was it was like I was holding a Post-it note in my hand. I wasn't really, but like figuratively holding this Post-it note in my hand, and walked over to that leader. And that leader opened his mouth and said, hey, this person has asked for more money. And I was like, well, awesome, because I came over here to tell you we need to give them more money because they're a flight risk. Here's why, and here's the data behind this, and here's why we think why we want to make this case to proactively go increase this person's pay. And it was great, because I would love for that to be before the moment when the employee asks. Like that's where it would be great to get to, when you understand your markets well enough and with that much in the moment clarity. But actually having it be at the moment when the employee had asked just lent credibility to that moment. And so it was like, okay, see, like this works. And I can demonstrate that this was the right moment. But that was a little bit of an accident, and it hasn't really happened since. But we'll see in our next iteration. I'm really curious to see what we learn. I mean, just the ability to take, I think we have forever had data we've all kinds of data that has been incredibly difficult to surface insights from. And sometimes it's because it's behind a walled garden. Sometimes it's because it's in 5 different places. Sometimes it's because we just don't have the skill set or the access to support to do that. I mean, I remember when the first time I asked Claude hey, here's this set of data. Tell me blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And in 45 seconds, it was like, oh, here's your answer. Oh, and 6 other things you didn't think of. I was actually deeply sad for like a day, moped around for like a day, because I felt very sad for all of us who didn't like this, just that this technology didn't exist earlier for us and how much of a game changer it is right now. But man, if I had had it 5 and 10 years ago, what we could have done, especially when it was like
Yeah.
solo HR or when it was like you were a
Mhm.
team of 2 and your tools weren't very good, it would have been incredible. It still is incredible, but I did have a moment of sadness about that.
Well, hopefully, you're going to feel sad in 2 years' time again when it's going
I
to be
hope.
another leap, right? And
Yeah, that's
it's going to
right.
do even more. It's
That's
yeah,
right.
it's a wild, wild time. Well,
I
and
mean,
thank you so much.
it's fascinating to think about what it means to be an employee, what it'll mean to be a manager, what is the role of
Yeah,
HR, what is all of these things are up for grabs in a way that they haven't been in any of our lifetimes before, and I'm for one really excited about it.
you're all for it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
want to see where this goes too.
yeah,
Before we wrap up, is there any final thought you want to leave someone with who's kind of in the middle of a process optimization like pay performance in this new age of agentic AI?
yeah. Pilot. I can't.
Mhm.
I learned this from the incredible Cara Brennan Alamano. Pilot,
She's
pilot.
awesome.
Yeah, and she's right. That's why she's awesome. Because if you can get a small group of people to test something, you can learn from it, they can learn something, they will tell someone else like, "Oh, we did this cool thing." And so you're both making the process better and building support for the process at the same time.
Yes.
The more you can do that.
And it's also one follow-up question. I would assume it's also okay to fail a pilot because the intention is to learn from there. And there's going to be certain pilots that work out and certain pilots that fail. So
Yes.
I'm assuming you're building in kind of like almost like a bench of like, we're going to try these things. Some things are not going to work. Some things are going to work. And is that how you're kind of looking at it? Or
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
if you've ever failed on a grand scale, if you're like, hey, we have this new thing, it's so awesome. We
yeah,
spent 9 months building it. Here you go. And everyone's like, yeah, we're
no
not
thanks.
interested in that at all. No, thank you.
Yeah,
Monumental waste. If I can learn from 5 people that they hate this a lot, I'm like, great, off we go. I'm not doing that anymore. Much,
love it.
much, much prefer to fail in pilot than fail for the whole organization.
Good. Yeah, it feels like there's a narrative where they're saying, hey, there's so many failed pilots, but I feel like it's a bit of a red herring because some pilots are okay to fail
Yeah.
because that's built into the process. But yeah, interesting. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Anne.
You're
Um,
welcome. Thank you so
I
much.
imagine people are probably going to have more questions about how you did certain things. Is LinkedIn the right place for folks to reach out to you and DM you?
Yes, absolutely. Please reach out on LinkedIn. Would love to hear from people. It's a great moment. I was really excited last week when Lovable announced that they had done this, and all of a sudden everybody started sending me that article like, "Hey, didn't you guys do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we did. Like, let's get more people
Yeah,
doing this because I actually think it's a really positive. I think it's a win for managers. I think it's a win for employees. I think it's a win for HR, which frankly we need one. And I think it's a much more equitable way for us to do this without having that sort of lack of integrity that the way we're doing it now has.
totally. Love it. Thank you so much, Anne. And
Thank you.
for everybody else listening to the WorkOps podcast, we'll catch you on the next one.